There is a particular kind of person the world does not understand until it is too late to ignore them. They were never the loudest in the room. They didn't collect the most friends or chase the most approval, and for a long time, sometimes a very long time, they looked, from the outside, like someone who was simply behind. Like someone who missed the memo on how to fit in, but they weren't behind. They were building. What solitude actually is, let's start by destroying a myth. Solitude is not loneliness. These two things get confused constantly, and the confusion does real damage. Loneliness is an ache. It's the feeling of wanting connection and not finding it. It's passive. It's painful. It's the experience of absence. Solitude is something entirely different. Solitude is a presence. It is the deliberate turning inward, the engagement with your own mind, your own values, your own unfinished architecture of self. It is not comfortable, but it is purposeful. And the person built for something larger than ordinary life has a relationship with that silence that other people find deeply uncomfortable to be around. Most people, when they're alone with themselves for too long, reach for noise. A phone, a drink, a conversation, anything to avoid the interior. Because the interior, when you're untrained, is a frightening place. It holds everything you've been avoiding: your fears, your contradictions, your unresolved grief, your deepest questions about who you actually are. The person being built in solitude does not run from that. They sit in it. They learn the shape of it. Over years, they become fluent in a language that most people never speak, the language of their own deep self. And that fluency is exactly what makes them capable of leading others through the interior of their lives one day. What those years are actually doing when you are in that season, when you're isolated, misunderstood, seemingly stuck while the world moves around you, something specific is happening psychologically. Several things, actually. The first is the development of an internal compass that is not calibrated to applause. Think about how most human behavior works. We calibrate right and wrong, good and bad, worth and worthlessness by watching how other people react to us. We look in the social mirror constantly. Most people don't even realize they're doing it. Their entire sense of self is assembled from reflected images. The person formed in solitude does not have that mirror readily available. So they are forced painfully, slowly, to develop their own. They have to decide what they believe without a crowd confirming it. They have to hold a position when no one is clapping. They have to move in a direction when no one else can see what they see. This is where conviction comes from. Not stubbornness conviction. The kind of certainty about purpose and direction that isn't destroyed by opposition or silence or waiting. That does not grow in communities. It grows in the quiet. The second thing that solitude builds is a tolerance for discomfort that most people genuinely cannot match. If you have sat with yourself, really sat with yourself, without escape, you have already met the worst version of you and decided to continue. You have faced the fear that you might be nothing, the fear that you were wrong about everything, the fear that the silence means you don't matter, and you are still here. That means pressure cannot break you the same way it breaks people who have never had to be alone with those fears. Because you already know the answer to the question the pressure is asking. You've already been there. You survived it without an audience. A room full of opposition is nothing compared to what you've faced in your own silence at 3 in the morning. The third thing, and this is perhaps the most practically powerful, is the kind of thinking that only emptiness produces. Deep original thought requires space. It requires unoccupied mental bandwidth. When you are constantly engaged with other people, their moods, their expectations, their language, their needs, your cognitive bandwidth is full. You are processing the world through 1,000 layers of social noise. Solitude empties that. It leaves you available to think thoughts that have never been arranged in quite that way before. To see connections that crowds obscure. To develop the kind of vision that is not borrowed from whoever was impressive last Tuesday. Almost every person who fundamentally changed the direction of history spent extended, serious time in withdrawal before their contribution. Newton during the plague years. Moses in the wilderness. The Buddha under the tree. It is not incidental. It is the method. The mythology encoded it first. Every culture on earth told the same story before any of us were born. The hero is called. The hero resists. The hero crosses a threshold into the unknown. The hero descends into the underworld, into the wilderness, into the belly of the whale alone. Faces the thing, is transformed by it, and returns. The return is the part most people focus on. The triumph, the crown, the arrival. But the mythology spends most of its time in the descent, because that is where the actual story happens. And notice the descent is always solitary. That is not a narrative device. That is a psychological map. The transformation that makes someone capable of leading others cannot be shared. It cannot be done in groups. It cannot be outsourced to a mentor or a community or a movement. It has to happen inside one person in the dark, with no audience. What is actually being described in that mythology is the death of the false self. The persona built from social approval, from inherited expectations, from the image of yourself you constructed to survive your environment. That self has to dissolve, and it will not dissolve while you are performing for an audience. It dissolves in the silence, in the in-between. Years. In the season where nothing seems to be happening and everything is actually happening. The dangers nobody talks about now, and this matters. Not everything that comes out of solitude is clean and pure and ready to lead. Solitude can also produce distortions. And if you carry this archetype, you need to look at these honestly. The first is what you might call messianic inflation. The person who has developed unusual inner strength through isolation can begin to confuse their sense of singularity with divine permission. They start to believe that the fact that they were different, that they suffered more, saw more, endured more means they are above correction, that the rules don't apply, that their vision justifies the cost they impose on others. This is how prophets become tyrants. It is not a dramatic shift. It is a slow drift, enabled by people who are too intimidated or too devoted to tell the truth. The protection against this is not weakness. It is an active, cultivated, chosen humility, the kind that doesn't come naturally to someone who built everything in private, alone, through force of will. It has to be deliberately grown. The second distortion is relational atrophy. A person who has lived for years inside their own mind can lose, or never fully develop, the capacity for genuine closeness. They can lead thousands while being truly intimate with no one. Their relationships become transactional, efficient. People become means to a vision rather than ends in themselves. And eventually the leader becomes a lonelier and more dangerous version of the isolated person they started as, except now, they have power. The third is the inability to eventually let go. Solitude builds radical self-reliance. But there is a stage of leadership always where you have to build beyond yourself, where the work is too large for one mind, where you have to trust people not just with tasks but with the vision itself. The person who was assembled in isolation will find this nearly impossible unless they have done the deliberate work of learning how to receive, not just give. Destiny is not a guarantee. Here is the thing about destiny that nobody says directly enough. Destiny is not a guarantee of arrival. It is a direction. It is a gravity, a pull toward a particular kind of person you could become and a particular kind of contribution you could make. But you can resist that gravity. You can choose comfort over development. You can stay in the wilderness long after it has done its work. You can take the gifts built in silence and spend them on a smaller life than the one you were shaped for. Many people do. The call will come and has probably already come before you feel ready, before the wounds are fully healed, before you have done enough preparation to satisfy the part of you that is still afraid. Readiness is the condition the isolated person uses forever to delay the mission. There is always one more year of becoming before the being can begin. But the becoming never stops. It continues during the mission, not before it. You do not arrive ready. You arrive willing, and readiness builds on the road. The return there is a moment, if you stay on this road long enough, where you look back at the years of silence and realize they were not punishment. The years of being misunderstood were years of becoming unbreakable. The years no one saw you were years you were being assembled for something that required you to be stronger than applause. The exile was preparation. You were not left out, you were being built. And the thing you are built to do, the contribution, the leadership, the specific weight you were meant to carry into the world, it requires exactly what those years produced. The compass that doesn't bend to the crowd, the tolerance for darkness that only comes from having sat in it, the depth that silence carved out. That is the psychology of the chosen one built in solitude, not someone who was handed something. Someone who became something in private, at great cost, without an audience, and now has something real to give. The world doesn't follow certainty. It doesn't follow credentials. It follows the person who has clearly already been somewhere that others are afraid to go. Be that person.